Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and this is going to be my review for Orphan Black Season 2, Episode 2, Governed by Sound Reason and True Religion. And oh my god, guys, this episode was it was amazing. And I feel like this episode was better than the first episode, because the first episode was great, but this episode was just 10 times better. I mean, a lot of, really intense scenes in this episode, and we'll just get into it. The one thing was, this episode, yes, it focused on Sara, but there wasn't as much with Sara in this episode. You know, Sara's our main character and everything, so it does have to focus on Sara, but it didn't focus as much on her. However, she still was the main plot. So let's just get to Sara first. So we first see Helena. Now, Helena kind of wants to help Sara. She is in the office. All she had on her were sugar packs and lollipops, and Felix visits Sara at Art's place. Art is helping find them when Kira calls Felix. And she says she's not supposed to call and she doesn't know where she is, but that's, there's a weird man there. So Art's tracking the call, and it's a motel in Bridge County, but Felix thinks it's a trap. He got new phones for the clones, and this time with a green case, and gives one to Sara. So, Art and Sara, they show up in a meeting with Dr. Leaky, Cosima and Delphine. Oh, we'll talk about Cosima in a second. Art and Sara show up at the motel. Art says there was no mention of a woman, so Mrs. S wasn't with Kira and her kidnapper. They go to her room, find a drawing made by Kira, when Daniel, who's one of Rachel's men, so obviously he's not good, he shows up, and while Art checks out what's going on, Sara finds a piece of clothing left by Kira, and they find a trail of them, which leads them to a laundry room and a garage. Now, there's a car in the garage, and it has an open trunk, and Sarah's relieved to see that Kira isn't in it, but then the man who has Kira, surprised her from behind, puts his hand over her mouth, telling her to get in. Really, really intense here. Sarah's plot throughout this whole episode, just really intense, and I'll get to, it got really intense later, which I'll get to. The man lets Sara out of the trunk, and in the middle of some woods, she asks where Kira is, but he says someone else will be along, and it's Mrs. S. And I freaked out when we saw her again. I was like, oh, it's Mrs. S. Mrs. S took Kira, and she says she took Kira, and Kira's fine. And she knew that when Kira called Sara would come looking. The man leaves them after handling Mrs. S another clone phone. Sara asks whose side she's on. She says Sara's. But still, Sara doesn't really know if she should trust Mrs. S, because Mrs. S took Kira. So she doesn't really know if she should trust her. And this whole episode, you don't know if you should trust Mrs. S, and I really like that. The writers have always said, this is a show where you really don't know who to trust. So Mrs. S explains to Sara that she left before anyone came and made the house look like an abduction. She takes her to the place they went when they came from the UK, and the people there helped them disappear a long time ago. Now Mrs. S thinks they'll help again, and Kira reunites with Sara. That was a really touching scene when she met up with Sara. Just I thought that was a really well done scene. I enjoyed that a lot. It was really good. So then, basically, back at Art's place, Angie wants to know what happened with Sara. Art doesn't tell her, and Angie lets them know about the Jane Doe, Helena, at the hospital. And I'll talk about Helena in a second, but basically, Sarah asks Mrs. S what she was going to do, and Mrs. S says she booked 2 flights to London for her and Kira. She says there are 2 people in London with answers, but Sara doesn't want her to go. Sara gave Mrs. S the photo Amelia gave her and tells her she warned her about Mrs. S, but Mrs. S says she doesn't know who the people in the photo are. So Sara brings Kira upstairs after dinner. She shows Kira the photo, and Kira says she's seen it when Mrs. S was snooping in Amelia's stuff. Kira doesn't think Mrs. S is good at this point. Again, you don't know if you should trust Mrs. S. And Sara says they should go. Barry comes back from a phone call. The car they had for taking Kira and Mrs. S to the airport isn't coming. And here is where shit hits the fan. It's really intense here. The people that were there, the people they were with then get guns out, stop Mrs. S from going out to see Sara. Mrs. S then attacks the woman, stabs her in both hands, so that way that woman is pinned to the ground. And while Barry tries to get Sara out of the car, Mrs. S shoots him. And Mrs. S then lets them leave in the truck. And then Mrs. S visits the woman she stabbed. And I was very happy because now we know we can trust Mrs. S. So that really is a good thing. Because if, the whole episode we're like, should we trust Mrs. S? I don't know if we should trust her. But now I'm pretty sure we can trust her. And I'm happy that they did say, you can trust her. So yeah, we pretty much can trust her at this point. So Mrs. S then visits the woman she stabbed. And she wants to go to know why they turned against her. The Proletheans got to them, and Mrs.S says that Sara and Kira were Project Leda before killing the woman. So, Sara, Kira, Kira, and Felix decide to leave town and go somewhere else where Mrs.S isn't, because they don't think it's safe. Even though they know that they can trust Mrs.S, they don't think it's safe here. They don't want to be near the Proletheans, so they decide to leave town. So we don't know where they're going, but probably London, but we'll just have to see. And it doesn't seem like Kira's happy about this. She actually seemed kind of upset about this, so we'll have to see what happens there. But now we'll get to Allison, because she had a lot of stuff going on as well. So at Ainsley's funeral, the whole thing with Allison is that she is really feeling a lot of grief and just kind of like depression and just like kind of regretting letting Ainsley die. They're at Ainsley's funeral. Donnie gives Allison his jacket while he goes to take care of the kids, and he gets a text message from, presumably, Dr. Leakey. And she reads them. They're all non-specific, though it's pretty clear now he's her monitor. We kind of knew already that he was her monitor, but they didn't straight out tell us he's her monitor, so we didn't know for sure. But at the community theater rehearsal, which, by the way, the musical that Allison is doing, oh my god, I laughed so hard at that scene. It was so funny at the musical. You know, it's going to be really funny if they do an episode where that musical actually ends up happening and we see, like, the opening night. That'd be really funny, and I'd love to see that. Sorry. I'd love to see that, and, yeah, that'd be really funny. So Felix shows up while Allison is rehearsing, and she tells him she thinks Donnie is her monitor now. Felix doesn't agree and says vague texts don't mean anything. He wants to prove Donnie is her monitor by setting a trap. And then what happens is, at Allison, she's on the phone with Felix in front of Donnie, and while Felix is playing one of his men naked, that was honestly a disgusting scene, just because I don't want to see naked men, obviously. Allison says she needs to go out and meet with Sara, and she goes to Ainsley's grave. Donnie follows, but instead of Sara, you know, she basically says, to talk about Sara, she thinks he's talking about Sarah Manning. It's actually Sarah Stubbs from the community theater. Allison then realizes she was followed and confronts Donnie. So, it was really creepy, honestly, in that scene when she was confronting Donnie. It was actually just, I don't know why, I found that scene kind of creepy. But eventually, Allison calls Felix, lets him know that Donnie took the bait, which means she needs to get out of there, but Felix is leaving town. Allison is upset by this, but Felix says she should call Cosima, you know, to let her know what's going on. And, speaking of Cosima, let's get to Cosima, because she had a lot of stuff to do in this episode as well. By the way, I really liked Allison's plot. Thought it was really well done. She now knows that Donnie is her monitor. I'm really interested in seeing where it's going to go from here. Let's go to, Cosima, because she had a lot of stuff to do. So, in a meeting with Dr. Leakey, Cosima and Delphine tell him they have never trusted Sara, and he just wants to help Cosima. Delphine then convinces her she wants to make crazy science with her. They're slowly convincing her to work for the Dyad. And Leakey shows Cosima her new lab, and she shows it to, Delphine. And Cosima is planning out what she wants in her lab when Delphine and her get all sexy. Rachel visits and introduces herself to Cosima. Very good scene here. I love the scene where Rachel and Cosima interacted. You know, some of the best scenes on the show is where Tatiana Maslany is actually, you know, kind of talking to herself in a way. I heard she's not actually talking to herself, though. They said that they show the scene twice. I mean, it definitely is cool to see that, and I really enjoy that, those scenes. I think those scenes are definitely some of the best scenes on the show. But Rachel visits and can introduce herself to Cosima. She gives Cosima her results from her last blood test, gives her the data, and Cosima asks to study the original gnome, but Rachel says it's not possible. Rachel says the original DNA was robust, and the disease stems from the cloning procedure. So Rachel then gives her Sarah Manning's gnome because she wants to know why Rachel is different from them, why she can have a child. So I mean that's a pretty big thing. Why she can have a child and no one else can. So that was Cosima's plot. You know, I enjoyed Cosima's plot that I thought was really big. And then the last thing we have to talk about is Helena, because there was a lot of stuff with Helena in this episode, especially at the end. The ending was so big. So we saw Helena in the office. You know, she's in a hospital bed and everything, but she somehow, got away. We don't know how she got away, but, you know, we don't know how she got away, as I said. So, at Art's place, Angie wants to know what happened with Sarah, but Art doesn't give. Angie lets him know what the Helena, Jane Doe, they call her Jane Doe, it's Helena at the hospital, and Art wants her to drop the whole thing, but she goes to the hospital anyway. By the time she goes to visit, Helena has been taken by Mark, the Prolethean. So, back with the Proletheans, Hank explains to Thomas that all of Helena's organs were reversed, and that's why when she got shot, she survived. I thought that was just really well done, because we needed to know, how is she not dead? It's not just like, oh, she's just alive. They have a reason for why she's alive. You know, all of her organs are reversed. So, Thomas thinks it's the mark of corruption, but Hank thinks it's God opening a new door. I thought that was a really good scene. You know, you see Helena in a hospital, in a hospital bed and everything. I just thought that scene was really well done. I enjoyed that a lot. I liked that scene when they were talking. And then the only other thing with Helena is that at the very end, and this is really, really big, Henrik asks Thomas if Helena could conceive a baby too, but Thomas says that any child Helena bears will be a monster, and that's when Mark kills him with a nail gun. So, I mean, that was so, so big. So, Thomas is now dead, and we'll have to see what happens there, but I love this episode, personally. I thought it was a great episode, and another fantastic episode. And one of the things that I personally loved about this episode was the fact that, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, and you really don't know who to trust at this point. You know, you're pretty sure you can trust Mrs.S. You know, they kind of showed us that. But the thing is, can we trust Donnie? I don't really know if we can trust Donnie at this point. Cosima's storyline, it's interesting there. I don't know what's going to happen there, but we found out that she doesn't trust Sarah, so I don't know what's going to happen there. Where are Sara, Felix, and Kira going to go to? I'm interested in seeing that. What is going to happen with Allison and Donnie? I personally don't know. Now that Mark has killed Thomas, what's going to happen with Henrik, Thomas, and Mark? I don't exactly know what's going to happen there. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it I want to say for this episode. But again, a fantastic episode. I loved every minute of it. Everything was really, really strong in this episode. That's it for my review. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Again, it was a pretty great episode. I'll see you guys for my next review, which probably won't be till tomorrow night for Once Upon a Time, Game of Thrones. So, see you then. Bye.